Good evening. My name is Diane Hobbs. I teach kindergarten at Cole Elementary School. The focus of my EDS project has to do with primary reading instruction for our English language learners in kindergarten or pre-K. The title of my project is How Primary Reading Instruction Impacts Second Language Acquisition for Spanish-Speaking Pre-K to Kindergarten Students. Now, just to give you a basic introduction for my project, second language acquisition is very difficult, as I'm sure many of you can empathize with. Not only are these students learning social and cultural conversations, conversational styles, they're learning social and cultural norms, they're learning how to be in school for the first time, and they're also learning how to read in a language that they don't speak. Scaffolding reading development is something that we learn about all the time. Even when you think about native English speaking students, when you create lessons and implement strategies, you are always looking at how to scaffold their learning so that they have access to the content. Now, this is something that we need to think about when we're looking at our English language learners as well. Native language is something that the students already know. It's something that they already have, something they already can experience. It is the biggest thing you can use to scaffold their reading development. In this project, I talk a lot about bilingual instruction and how we can use their native languages to scaffold their reading development. Bilingual instruction can look different. In some cases, it's a class that is entirely in their native language. In some cases, it is starting in your native languages and transitioning to English by third or fourth grade. And in some cases, it's simultaneous, where part of the day or part of the instruction will be in the student's native language and the other part will be in English. So something I've kind of talked about already, sorry about the typo right there. The problem that I want to focus on is that English language learners begin their reading instruction with a deficit. And I don't want to say that speaking in other languages is a deficit. That is not at all what I mean. What I mean is that they come to school not knowing the language that is being taught. They're learning math, they're learning English, they're learning reading, they're learning social studies, they're learning science completely in another language. And that is a deficit for them. They are not able to access the content because they don't understand the language. Another problem is that a majority of the English language learners in our schools are not meeting benchmarks, because the benchmarks are set for students who speak English for their native language and have complete access to the content. Another problem that I want to talk about is that current primary reading instruction strategies for English language learners is not enabling students to meet the benchmarks, because the reading strategies are designed for native English speakers, not our learners that are acquiring English as their second language. So some literature that I picked up during my my research on this topic comes from Slavin and Schwang. They synthesized the language of reading instructions for EL students and conducted that in a majority of cases, bilingual instruction is favorable. Now, they did 4 studies, 3 of which showed that students receiving bilingual instruction scored higher on state benchmarks or national benchmarks, and the other school showed that there was no difference. Another piece of literature that I found said that theories suggest that vocabulary comprehension is the reason for the achievement gap that we see amongst native English speakers and English language learners. A study by Diane August Maria Carlo, Cheryl Dresser, and Catherine Snow shows that fourth grade ELLs know fewer English vocabulary words and less depth of meaning of those words than monolingual English-speaking students. Now, what that means is that these students who are being measured at the same rate as our English-speaking students do not have the same amount of vocabulary knowledge and understanding as our English-speaking students. Not only do they not know the same amount of words, but those words that they do know, they don't have the depth of meaning of those words like our English language learners do. And they don't understand how to use it in every sort of context or how it can mean different things in different areas. So that is something that is the reason for this huge achievement gap that we see. Other theories suggest that bilingual education will better give students access to the content and in turn raise test scores. Now, my goal is not always to raise test scores. My goal is that these students have access to the content and are able to learn to read. And if bilingual education is something that will enable that to happen, then that is something that I definitely want to push for. Now, in my presentation, the technology tool that I'll be using, other than PowerPoint, is a website called Polls Everywhere. They have an option on there for multiple choice questions, which is something that I will be using to gauge the audience's mindset on the topic at hand. Also to gauge their knowledge of EL instruction. They also have an option called word cloud. So at the beginning of my presentation, I plan to have a statement that is basically the gist of my the title of my proposal. So I'm basically just going to put primary reading instruction I'm going to put how native language can impact primary reading instruction. And then they're able to submit a word or a phrase that they think of whenever they read that statement. And then we're going to look at that word cloud and kind of gauge the knowledge and the feeling and the mindset that we have in the room. Another option that is on Polls Everywhere is called Rankings. And so with this, I will be able to see who is willing to participate in using the reading response journals, and I'm able to see gauge the understanding of the content that I am distributing to them. So rankings will enable me to pose a question and then see where the audience rates, sort of like on a bar graph. There's also a question and answer option, and then there's an emotion scale. So I plan to use Polls Everywhere throughout my presentation to gauge the audience, to gauge their understanding, to gauge their mindsets, to keep them engaged, to keep their attention, and just to kind of make this more of a discussion rather than a lecture. Well, thank you very much for listening to a very, very short kind of overview of what I'm presenting, why I'm presenting it, and what sort of technology I'm going to include. And if you can hear a crying 2-year-old in the background, I also apologize for that. Thank you very much, and y'all have a great evening.